Hey guys, so I wanted to make this video to talk about a problem that a lot of language learners face when studying a foreign language, and that is plateauing. So language learners kind of reach this plateau at about an intermediate level, maybe like a B1 level. And the thing is, when you plateau, it's kind of hard to get out of that plateau to make progress because you've reached a certain level. You don't know where to go from there. You're trying a lot of different strategies maybe to get away from this to make progress, but it's hard, and you may be putting in a lot of time and effort, but you're not seeing a lot of progress. So for me, I'm going to share a little bit about when I kind of reached this plateau and what I did to get out of it. So I'm going to be talking about my experience with learning Italian and Spanish a little bit because these are the languages I speak the best. And so I reached this plateau when I was about at an intermediate level, about a B1 in both languages. So I had been learning Spanish from middle school, 8th grade, until my freshman year of college. So I had about 6 years worth of classes. I didn't have to necessarily, well, I could have, but I guess I didn't put in a lot of extra time outside of class up until I started taking Spanish in college. At the university is when you're kind of required, you have to go out and use Spanish and do these assignments where you're using Spanish in the real world, per se, versus just studying it in class, being told what to study, and just using it in that scenario. So I didn't really have to think about what I had to study. I was being told what to study. So after my freshman year of college ended, my freshman semester, that is, I didn't take any more Spanish classes after that, and I think I kind of didn't really know where to go from there, so I didn't really put in a lot of study time. And with Italian, I had started learning Italian my senior year of high school, and by the time I had started taking Spanish at the university is when my Italian and Spanish were at the same level. Although my Italian, my vocabulary was a lot better. I had a wide range. And with Spanish, I think my grammar was a lot better because that's really what I was more taught of in school. We had a lot of vocabulary that I studied for exams, but after that I didn't study again. I didn't pay attention to because I thought they were kind of useless in a sense. We were learning vocabulary about recycling and diseases, sicknesses, and I just felt like I didn't need to know them. Or I did, but like not at the time, so I wasn't going to worry about it. So that's what my vocabulary lacked. I didn't really tend to remember all the new vocabulary that I was using, just the ones I used most often. So at the same time, I plateaued in these languages, I would say. And for about a year, I really didn't make much progress. I think for Italian, I was using the same strategies a lot. So what I was doing is I would set out a certain time of day. So during the summer after work, I would study Italian for about an hour and a half. The problem was, although I was putting a good amount of time in a week studying Italian, I wasn't making any progress because I didn't change my studying methods, my material. I was doing the same thing basically every day, and I wasn't really studying vocabulary that much. I thought it was fine, and I didn't try any new methods. I was listening to the same listening exercises, same interviews, same podcast. I wasn't learning from them because I already had heard them a lot of times, and there was no progress made there. So after that, after my freshman year of college ended, I really didn't put a lot of studying time into any of the languages. I didn't do anything. With Italian, I would only used it probably every day, but just to talk with my Italian friends. And so I was maintaining the language, but I wasn't making any improvement. With Spanish, I really wasn't using that at all. I read books for a little bit, but I would get frustrated easily because my vocabulary wasn't as good as my Italian, so I really wasn't making a lot of progress. I would look up words when I didn't know them, but I wouldn't study these words. So I wasn't doing anything to help with that. So after about a year, what I did is I decided that if I indeed wanted to work in a job where I could use these languages, then I really did need to make progress. And even though I didn't know where to start, I had to change something. So what I decided to do is I decided to be an au pair in Italy. And now I'm not saying traveling is the way to get past this plateau, because I certainly believe you can become fluent in a language without having to travel to a country where that language is spoken. So what I did, though, I think traveling and living in Italy for 3 months helped me realize what improvements I needed to make, and going from there, trying to figure out how to make these improvements. So when I got to Italy, I realized, since I had never spoken to a native speaker before, like in a conversation that wasn't like text message or anything like that, I realized my speaking was very bad. My accent was not good. I already knew my accent wasn't good, but with hearing it like for 3 months, I kind of got used to it a little bit, and I think this helped a lot improving my accent. I wouldn't say it's perfect now, or I don't think I would say I sound like a native speaker, but it's a lot better. And I learned a lot more words that you don't necessarily learn in a classroom. With Italian, I never had taken it formally. I studied it independently. So everything that I did, it was kind of just throwing myself into it. I didn't know the exact way to go about learning a language, but it was a lot of experimenting. And eventually, I did find the right way to go about it. So after the 3 months ended and I returned to America, I realized that I did have a lot of studying to still do, a lot of things to do in order to reach the fluency that I desired. And I realized I was hoping my Italian would be a little bit better at the end of the 3 months, but it wasn't. I don't necessarily think 3 months is a long enough time if you're going to a country to fully immerse yourself. I think it's a decent amount of time, for sure. I learned a lot about the culture, and it was a really great experience overall. And so when I got back to America, I realized I had to sort of rethink how I study Italian, because I had stopped studying it like formally, like with taking notes, with learning online. I stopped doing that for about a year, and that did not help me at all. So when I got back, I was looking into seeing how I can get to that level. Not only that, but the job I wanted was to be a translator or interpreter. So I realized I need to see what I need to do in order to reach that without having a college degree, because I'm no longer a college student. So I did my research and I found what exam that I needed to take. And it was the C2 Chills Italian exam. So at this time I tested my level in Italian and Spanish, and they were both at a B1. So I think I would say my Italian was better than my Spanish at this point, and I was at a B1, but probably like a mid B1, kind of getting close to a B2. So at this point I was moving overseas again, this time to Australia, to be an au pair once again. So I had chosen to be an au pair in a really big city, Melbourne, because first of all, I'd never lived in a big city, and I really wanted a bit of a change, and in my city, there weren't the opportunities that I needed to improve my languages in the way that I wanted to go about doing it. So when opportunities out there for you, you have to go looking for them. So what I did is I decided to go and enroll in an Italian class. So I think this is good if you've never, I'd never taken an Italian class before. It was all self-taught. So I think this is a good way to go about it if you are learning a language independently, because for me, there are some things that I didn't know I should have known, that I didn't know I was supposed to be studying, or I didn't realize certain things were supposed to work certain ways, like with grammar, with sentence structures, that kind of thing. So if you're not a school student, if you're not in school, if you're not in high school, or if you're not a college student, you can still take classes. If your city doesn't have like specific, like if there's not language schools, if you live in a small city like I do now, I would recommend looking into classes at a university, a tech school, or a 2-year college, because this is probably the best option if they don't have any language schools in your city. So, and when I lived in Melbourne, they did have language schools. I went to an Italian language school. Like I said, I went to a French language school. There's a lot of options. If you live in Melbourne and you would like recommendations, you can just let me know in the comments and I'll tell you what schools I really like there. Now, if there still isn't any language schools or any language classes you can take in your city, what I recommend doing is looking for an online tutor. You can also, you can look for one in your city. The thing about that is it's probably going to be more expensive. And if you don't want to spend a whole lot of money doing that, then an online tutor, like on a website like italki, is what's going to work the best. And here's why I think that. Like, I looked at the progress I made within a year, and I can fully say that the teachers I had on the website I used, which was italki, helped me get to this level, helped me improve my accent. I would not be at the level that I am without those teachers' help. And so that's why I fully recommend it. I do see progress was made. I did see progress was made, and I fully think 100% it is worth it. So I looked for a teacher online specifically for the exam I was taking, but also I used a few other teachers along the way that just to practice different things, not just fully focusing on the exam, because there were other things I needed to prepare for, just like, talking about everyday things, keeping up with daily conversation. And so you can find tutors for a wide range of things, like test prep, or for business, for work, for school. There's a lot of options out there. They have a lot of different languages you can choose from if you're not, if you're not just taking like a Spanish, Italian exam like I was. And so I've been using italki for almost a year now. I started probably about 9 months before my exam. And I think, yeah, I would say, like, because in my city and where I was living, there wasn't a lot of Italian speakers to help for me to, like, speak it just every day, it really helped my accent, and it wouldn't have improved as much without it. So what I recommend doing is looking for an online tutor if you're worried about pronunciation, if that's one of your big things, just being able to have a conversation or speak it. Another thing that helped me the most was changing my material. Not looking for new material versus repeating the old material again and again and using the same study methods. So I realized I wasn't picking up on vocabulary as much as I wanted to. I used to use, well, I still do, I use Quizlet a lot, but the thing with Quizlet is, for me, I learn by memorization, but when it comes to memorization, it's not something that stays in my brain for a long time. So I realized that writing is something that works better for me when it comes to remembering things long term. So I would take a word, I would write it 3 or 4 times, and then I would use it in a sentence. And I would do that with a vocabulary list once or twice a week, and then switch once I had fully memorized that word, and so on. So I realized I needed new vocabulary methods to remember these things. I wasn't, there were some things like I just didn't like, so I didn't avoid them. Like, I used to not like writing practices as much. Reading, I like to read, but if you use material that is not at your level, you're going to get frustrated easily. So you need to maybe step down and maybe pick an easier book, and that is totally okay. It's not that, your level isn't good enough if you're reading a children's book. Doesn't mean that at all, because eventually you will get to the level you want to be reading, but you're not going to make progress if you start out at the top with a very hard or advanced book. It's something that if it's a book you really want to read, you're going to enjoy it more when you are actually at that level versus trying to struggle when you're not at the level, and it's not going to be enjoyable anymore for you. So really breaking that plateau is something you want to do so you can enjoy learning the language again. So if you guys have any questions for me, feel free to comment below. If you're into learning languages, traveling, or au pair things, be sure to check out my channel, subscribe if you want, and I will catch you all on the flip side. Ciao!